Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 5 of our course about the transition years. Today, we are reading two suttas, the Cīvara Sutta and the Upassaya Sutta, which are found in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the Kassapa Samyutta, and we will be reading 16.11, the Cīvara Sutta first. Before we start, as usual, I will chant the Namo Tassa. Feel free to join me if you want to. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to Gita, nice to see you, and Jayanta, and also Bhante Sudaso. Thank you for joining in. And welcome to everyone who is watching but not typing in the chat. Oh, hello, Tara, welcome. And Mike and Kumu and also Ayya Soma. Very nice to see both venerables. Thank you so much for joining. So we will be reading the Cīvara Sutta first, Samyutta Nikaya 16.11. There's a link in the description box. And I will be reading from Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. And the sutta begins. On one occasion, the Venerable Mahakassapa was dwelling at Jajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. So from this first sentence, we can already see that this sutta is set in the time after the Buddha's passing, because in any sutta that is set during the Buddha's lifetime, the sutta would start with telling us the location of the Buddha. So even if the Buddha doesn't feature in that sutta, even if the sutta is about other monks or nuns, the sutta would always start with the location of the Buddha. So because that's not happening here, we know that this sutta takes place after the parinibbana. So the text continues. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Ananda was wandering on tour in Dakshinagiri together with a large sangha of bhikkhus. Now on that occasion, 30 bhikkhus, pupils of the Venerable Ananda, most of them youngsters, had given up the training and had returned to the lower life. So we see that Venerable Ananda is wandering around and he has a very large following of other monks. So it seems that he was quite popular, that he was accepted as a guide and as a leader by a significant portion of the Sangha. And when the Venerable Ananda had wandered on tour in Dakshinagiri as long as he wanted, he came back to Rajagaha, to the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. He approached the Venerable Mahakassapa, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side. And the Venerable Mahakassapa said to him, "Friend Ananda, for how many reasons did the Blessed One lay down the rule that bhikkhus should not take meals among families in groups of more than 3? So Mahakassapa obviously is asking a Vinaya question here, and this is a rule that is still found in the Patimokkha's nowadays. This is a reference to Bhikkhu Pacitya 32 or Bhikkhuni Pacitya 118, which is an interesting rule, and Ananda answers, "The Blessed One laid down this rule for 3 reasons, Venerable Kassapa, for restraining ill-behaved persons and for the comfort of well-behaved bhikkhus. With the intention, may those of evil wishes, by forming affection, not create a schism in the Sangha, and out of sympathy towards families. It is for these 3 reasons, Venerable Kassapa, that the Blessed One laid down this rule." So here in this exchange between Kassapa and Ananda, we can also see that this sutta must be set in the lifetime, after the lifetime of the Buddha, because if you remember last time, we talked about some of the last instructions that the Buddha gave to the Sangha. And one of them was that after the Buddha's passing, there should be a hierarchy in the Sangha. And the senior bhikkhus should address the more junior ones with their name or with the word avuso. So here translated as friend. And Bhante Sujato translates as reverend. And the more junior ones should address the more senior ones as Bhante or as Ayasma. So here translated as venerable. So since Kassapa is addressed as Venerable Kassapa and Ananda is addressed as Friend Ananda, we also see that this sutta has to be said after the Buddha's passing. And so Ananda explains that the rule is laid down for 3 reasons. And so we see that Kassapa asks Ananda a question, and Ananda speaks about the possibility of schism here. So one of the reasons for laying down the rule is that those of evil wishes by forming a faction could create a schism in the Sangha if that rule wasn't observed. So we see that, Ananda comes back to Kassapa, and the first thing that Kassapa asks him is, or the first thing that they talk about is the possibility of schism. So obviously this was something that was on people's minds after the Buddha had passed away, when he as a unifying figure was no longer around, and when people were quite unsure how things would develop and would continue for the Sangha. So they still had to find their way on their own. And schism seemed quite a reasonable possibility at that point. And to understand why, like what this rule has to do with schism, it's important to know a little bit about schism. So in modern times, when 2 monastics quarrel with each other and they don't agree on a point, then people very easily say, oh, they are creating a schism, and it's so bad that they don't agree on this point. So it's very easy today to be accused of a schism. But actually, the way schism is defined in the Vinaya is in quite a narrow way. And if you don't follow that procedure that is laid down in the Vinaya, then even if you disagree, if you have a major disagreement, it's not considered a proper schism in the sense of the Vinaya. So in the Vinaya, the way you have to act if you want to create a schism is that you have to recite the Patimokkha, the monastic code, within the same boundary of the same monastery in 2 separate groups. And so normally, if the Sangha is united, everybody from the same monastery, from the same Sima, from the same territory, will come together on the moon days, the full moon and the dark moon days, and they would recite Patimokkha together. And that's why Patimokkha is also called the meeting that defines harmony, or that defines community. So if you have 2 different groups reciting Patimokkha, then there is no community, then they have formed 2 separate communities. And the only way to create a schism is by reciting Patimokkha in the same territory in 2 different groups. So if 2 monks quarrel or 2 groups quarrel, and one of them goes to another place, forms their own separate monastery, then that is not a schism in the sense of the Vinaya. And so, of course, if you want to create a schism, you need at least 4 people to do that, because if you're less than 4 people, you cannot recite the Patimokkha. So groups of 3 or less people can't recite Patimokkha on the moon days. And the other thing that you need is, of course, lay support, because as monastics, we cannot survive without support from the lay people, material support, especially food. And so for that reason, if bhikkhus form their own factions in groups of more than 3, and they have their own lay support, that means they can go to lay people to get their meals, then there is a danger for schism. And for that reason, this rule is laid down that bhikkhus cannot take meals among families in groups of more than 3. And so those of you who are from traditional Buddhist countries, or those of you who have invited bhikkhus or bhikkhunis to your home already, you may have noticed that sometimes bhikkhus or bhikkhunis do come in groups of more than 3 to people's houses. So there are ways around this rule. And one of them is if you invite the entire Sangha of a monastery then they can all come even if the group is bigger, like more than 3 people, because then there is no danger of forming a schism. Or if you do not invite specific monastics, like if you don't say the bhikkhu name so and so and so and so and so and so, but you just call the monastery and say, please send me 5 monks or send me 5 nuns, and you don't specify which person, so that the monastery can pick who is going. And usually there's a roster for people, so people take turns going to lay people's houses. Then that's also okay, because then again, it's basically coincidence who will go, and there's again very little chance of people forming a faction. So so we see that in a roundabout way, Kassapa is asking Ananda here about a schism. And when Ananda answered the question, then Kassapa says to him, then why, friend Ananda, are you wondering about with these young bhikkhus who are unguarded in their sense faculties, immoderate in eating, and not devoted to wakefulness? One would think you were wondering about trampling on crops. One would think you were wondering about destroying families. Your retinue is breaking apart, friend Ananda. Your young followers are slipping away. But still this youngster does not know his measure. So suddenly Kassapa is turning against Ananda and accusing him quite harshly about all kinds of things. First of all, that his young bhikkhus, that they are not properly trained. So being unguarded in sense faculties and immoderate in eating and not devoted to wakefulness, obviously these are things that are at the very beginning of the gradual path. So he says that his followers haven't even learned that much, like not even the basic stages of the gradual training. So basically undermining Ananda's abilities as a teacher, and also criticizing him for not being considerate towards the lay people. So he is saying he's wondering about trampling on crops or destroying families. And then it's also accusing him of losing all his followers. So again, showing that Ananda shouldn't be looked up to as a leader. So undermining his authority and undermining his leadership quality, like his capabilities as a leader. And then, of course, calling him a youngster, Pali called Kumarako. So, of course, youngster here is not meant as a compliment. Here meant quite disparagingly as someone who is not very wise. And of course, Ananda then protests, gray hairs are growing on my head, Venerable Kassapa. Can't we escape being called a youngster by the Venerable Mahakassapa? But Kassapa then doubles down and repeats all the accusations again. Friend Ananda, it is just because you wander around with these young bhikkhus who are unguarded in their sense faculties and so on, but still this youngster does not know his measure. So here again, we see what we've seen a little bit before already, and what I've mentioned a few times, that after the Buddha's passing, and even before, the Sangha wasn't one unified block where everybody agreed on the way to practice. We see that there was quite a diverse array of practices, and one extreme was exemplified by Mahakassapa as the group who was very austere, very ascetic, very withdrawn from society, strict on the Vinaya, and not mingling much with lay people, and practicing in the forest, in the wilderness. And also we will see this is the group that is next week we will read text about that. Next week we will see this group is quite a misogynistic group, not at all in support of bhikkhuni ordination. And on the other extreme, there is Ananda's group, and they are quite sociable, approachable, sort of mixing more with lay people, also teaching lay people much more. So so basically, we know that lay people, they very much admire monks or nuns who are doing the ascetic practices in the forest. So those monks or nuns are quite a big inspiration for lay people. But when they need actual teachings, actual Dhamma teachings, it would rather be the other group, Ananda's group, who would be more easy to approach, also closer to the lay people. And also Ananda's group is, of course, the group that is very supportive of the bhikkhunis. And here we see that there is a certain tension between those groups, and Kassapa is accusing Ananda quite severely here, and also, as we see, trying to undermine his position as an authority figure or as a leadership figure. And then the Bhikkhuni Tulananda heard, Master Mahakassapa has disparaged Master Ananda, the Videhan sage, by calling him a youngster. Then, being displeased at this, she expressed her displeasure thus. How can Master Mahakassapa, who was formerly a member of another sect, think to disparage Master Ananda, the Videhan sage, by calling him a youngster? So here we see the Bhikkhuni Tulananda appears, and I think this is the only occasion where Tulananda appears in any sutta in the Pali Canon. She is a nun that appears regularly in the Vinaya, and in the Vinaya she's very famous, or I should say infamous, for being the nun foremost in misbehavior. So because of her, a lot of Vinaya rules were laid down. So like, she's not a good nun to be associated with. Like, if you're associated with her, then it's clear that you are not somebody who takes the Dhamma seriously. You are somebody who's constantly misbehaving and creating trouble for the sangha. And also her name, Tulananda, Tula means fat. So again, that's not not meant as a compliment here. And we see that Tulananda takes sides with Ananda against Mahakassapa. So it's well known throughout many of the other Buddhist schools, also not only the Pali tradition, that Tulananda and Kassapa did not get along well. So Tulananda is taking Ananda's side, and again, that doesn't work well for Ananda. That's again trying to undermine him by associating Ananda with that nun, that misbehaving nun. And Ananda is called the Videhan sage because his mother is from Videha. Videha is a place, a country. And Kassapa is being accused of having formerly been a member of another sect. So that refers to the fact that Kassapa wasn't a householder who gained faith in Buddhism and then straight away took ordination in the Buddha's Dhamma, in the Buddha's Sangha. But he went forth on his own and then encountered the Buddha and converted to Buddhism, basically, after he had gone forth. So Tulananda accuses him, and her accusation isn't totally wrong, but is also not totally correct. So Kassapa objects, and he overheard the Bhikkhuni Tulananda making this statement and said to the Venerable Ananda, surely, friend Ananda, the Bhikkhuni Tulananda made that statement rashly without consideration, for since I shaved off my hair and beard, put on saffron robes, and went forth from the home life into homelessness, I do not recall ever having acknowledged any other teacher except the Blessed One, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one. So now Kassapa tells the whole story of what happened, how he came in contact with Buddhism, and his ordination story, and then how he got enlightened and so on. It's quite a well-known, quite famous story. And he says, in the past, friend, when I was still a householder, it occurred to me, household life is confinement, a path of dust. Going forth is like the open air. It is not easy for one living at home to lead the perfectly complete, perfectly purified holy life, which is like polished conch. Let me then shave off my hair and beard, put on saffron robes, and go forth from the household life into homelessness. Some time later, I had an outer robe made from patches of cloth. Then acknowledging those who were arahants in the world as models, I shaved off my hair and beard, put on saffron robes, and went forth from the household life into homelessness. When I had thus gone forth, I was traveling along a road when I saw the Blessed One sitting by the Bahuputta shrine between Rajagaha and Nalanda. Having seen him, I thought, if I should ever see the teacher, it is the Blessed One himself that I would see. If I should ever see the fortunate one, it is the Blessed One himself that I would see. If I should ever see the perfectly enlightened one, it is the Blessed One himself that I would see. Then I prostrated myself right there at the Blessed One's feet and said to him, Venerable Sir, the Blessed One is my teacher, I am his disciple. Venerable Sir, the Blessed One is my teacher, I am his disciple. So here we see, in some way it's actually true, Mahakassapa did go forth without knowing Buddhism. He became a non-Buddhist wanderer first, but he never joined another sect. He was an independent wanderer, and when he encountered the Buddha, he straight away recognized the Buddha's spiritual power and took him as a teacher. So in that way, Tulananda's statement was not correct. That, like when she claimed that he had acknowledged that he was a member of another sect, that wasn't actually true. And when I had said this, the Blessed One said to me, Kassapa, if one who does not know and see should say to a disciple, so single-minded as yourself, I know, I see, his head would split. But knowing Kassapa, I say, I know, seeing, I say, I see. Therefore, Kassapa, you should train yourself thus. I will arouse a keen sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing towards elders, the newly ordained, and those of middle status. Thus should you train yourself. Therefore, Kassapa, you should train yourself thus. Whenever I listen to any dhamma connected with the wholesome, I will listen to it with eager ears, attending to it as a matter of vital concern, applying my whole mind to it. Thus should you train yourself. Therefore, Kassapa, you should train yourself thus. I will never relinquish mindfulness directed to the body associated with joy. Thus should you train yourself. So here we see that the Buddha gave Mahakassapa 3 trainings to observe. And I think it's very beautiful that we can see exactly the way in which Mahakassapa practiced to attain arahantship. And the first one is to observe the proper conduct towards everybody in the sangha, so to have a deep sense of respect towards the sangha, towards every member of the sangha, whether they are junior or senior, to establish this appreciation also for the sangha. And the second one is to establish this appreciation for the dhamma, to listen to it with eager ears, to attending to it as a matter of vital concern, and applying his whole mind to it. And the third one is his meditation practice. And I think this is also very beautiful. Of course, mindfulness directed to the body is still very popular nowadays, but that aspect that we have to practice it associated with joy is something that is often neglected in the modern practices, especially in the modern Vipassana movements. And I think this is something that that is really important to observe and to practice, because once you have joy, then it's much easier for your mind to settle on the object and to go into deep states of samadhi. And we know that also the jhanas, they also, especially the early ones, contain joy. So once you develop that joy, it's much easier for people to slip into a jhana. And also it shows us that Buddhism, and especially meditation practice, is supposed to be a joyful practice. It's not supposed to be hardship and not supposed to be difficult. And then Kassapa continues, then having given me this exhortation, the Blessed One rose from his seat and departed. For 7 days, friend, I ate the country's alms food as a debtor, but on the 8th day, final knowledge arose. So after 7 days, he managed to become an arahant. And here we see this metaphor about eating the country's alms food as a debtor. So that is a metaphor that is extremely common in the early texts, and it is explained in detail only in later texts, in the commentarial texts. So according to the commentarial texts, there are actually 4 ways in which somebody could eat the country's alms food. And the first one is as a thief. So if somebody goes forth without a genuine spiritual vocation, maybe just somebody who doesn't want to work and just wants to have a place where they can be lazy and don't need to do anything, and where they can be supported by other people, rely on other people, without actually having any genuine wish to develop a spiritual path, a spiritual training, or the higher stages of the Buddhist path, then they are considered a thief of the country's alms food, because people giving to them can't make as much merit as they could make if that person had a genuine spiritual vocation and was a sincere practitioner who is not trying to deceive other people. And so the first possibility is as a thief. The second one is as a debtor, and that means that is a person who has a genuine spiritual vocation, is genuinely trying to practice the path, but they have not attained stream entry yet. So they are still indebted to the lay people when they accept alms food from them. And the third way is as an heir, so somebody who makes an inheritance. And that's a person who is at least a stream enterer up to anagami, so who has not attained arahantship yet, but who is like fixed in the right path and who is destined to become an arahant, and like it's sure that they will eventually become an arahant. So they know that they will make the inheritance of the Buddha, so that's why they're considered an heir. And those people, if you support those people, you make a lot of merit. And the last stage, obviously, is the arahant, which is called eating the country's alms food as an owner. So you are the owner of the alms food rightfully. That means you no longer have a debt of gratitude towards the lay people, because the lay people, when they give to you, they make so much merit, it completely outweighs the benefit that you yourself get from the alms food. So that is the fourth stage as an arahant. So yeah, that is here the metaphor about eating the country's alms food. And Kassapa then continues the story of his encounter with the Buddha. So actually the next passage that we are reading now, the next paragraph, really belongs to the previous story where he met the Buddha the first time. So this continues the story of how he met the Buddha the first time. And there's just this small paragraph in between where he talks about his arahantship. So the chronology of this story is a little bit messed up here. And Kassapa says, "Then, friend, the Blessed One descended from the road and went to the foot of a tree. I folded in four my outer robe of patches and said to him, 'Venerable sir, let the Blessed One sit down here. This will lead to my welfare and happiness for a long time.' The Blessed One sat down on the appointed seat and said to me, 'Your outer robe of patches is soft, Kassapa. Venerable sir, let the Blessed One accept my outer robe of patches out of compassion. Then will you wear my worn-out hempen rag robes?' 'I will, Venerable sir.' Thus I offered the Blessed One my outer robe of patches and received from him his worn-out hempen rag robes." So this is a very famous story of Kassapa and the Buddha exchanging their robes. And it appears that Kassapa was quite, proud in a wholesome way to have received this special honor to receive the Buddha's old robes and be able to wear the Buddha's robes. And it is said that this was also when he undertook all the ascetic practices that he became famous for. And obviously, wearing these rag robes was the first one that he undertook. And because the Buddha encouraged him in this, with this special favor, he then kept on practicing the ascetic practices for his whole life. And it is also said that this instruction with the three kinds of trainings, like respecting the sangha, respecting the dhamma, and practicing meditation, mindfulness directed to the body, associated with joy, and this exchange of robes was actually Mahakassapa's ordination, his full ordination. So he didn't go through any of the normal procedures, but the Buddha accepted him into the sangha by this exchange of robes and this dhamma teaching. So then Kassapa continues, "If, friend, one speaking rightly could say of anyone, he is a son of the Blessed One, born of his breast, born of his mouth, born of the Dhamma, created by the Dhamma, an heir to the Dhamma, a receiver of worn-out hempen rag robes. It is of me that one could rightly say this. Friend, to whatever extent I wish, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I enter and dwell in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thought and examination, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. So now Kassapa goes through all of the attainments, the 4 jhanas, the 4 immaterial realms, the cessation attainment, and then the 6 abhinyas, the 6 higher knowledges with all the psychic powers, and the attainment of arahantship. So detailing all his accomplishments in meditation. And then he declares his arahantship in the following way. Friend, by the destruction of the taints in this very life, I enter and dwell in the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, realizing it for myself with direct knowledge. Friend, one might just as well think that a bull elephant 7 or 7.5 cubits high could be concealed by a palm leaf, as think that my 6 direct knowledges could be concealed. So he makes a very bold, very clear statement of his accomplishments. He says that everybody, it's like trying to hide this massive elephant behind a tiny palm leaf. So anybody who is not completely spiritually blind must see how accomplished Kassapa is. And this, of course, is in comparison to Ananda, who at this point is a stream enterer and who doesn't have all these accomplishments. So again, it's kind of like a dig at Ananda and a way, like a comparison between Ananda and Kassapa, and it's supposed to show how much more worthy Kassapa is as somebody who should take leadership roles in the sangha, and not Ananda. And we also hear that the Bhikkhuni Tulananda fell away from the holy life. So the person, again, another person who was siding with Ananda and who fell away from the holy life. And also implicitly in the sutta, it is kind of said that the bhikkhunis weren't able to recognize the spiritual might of Mahakassapa, and they also, like the Bhikkhuni Sangha, sided with somebody who is less worthy, with Ananda. So this is the first sutta we are reading today. And we are also reading another sutta, the sutta just before this one. So 16.10, called the Upassaya Sutta, which is a sutta that has very similar content. And that's because they're so similar, I really wanted to read them together. And so there is another link in the description box to the other sutta, or you can just, if you're on Sutta Central, just click back and see the sutta before. And I'm reading from Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, as I already mentioned. So the title of the sutta is Upassaya Sutta, and Upassaya means a dwelling place. And as you see, Bhikkhu Bodhi has titled it the Bhikkhuni's Quarters. So he added the word Bhikkhuni just to make it clear and to distinguish it from many other suttas. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Venerable Mahakassapa was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, another Pindika's park. So again, no mention of the Buddha's whereabouts. So we again see this is after the Buddha's passing. Then in the morning, the Venerable Ananda dressed, and taking bowl and robe, he approached the Venerable Mahakassapa and said, "Come, Venerable Kassapa, let us go to the Bhikkhuni's quarters. You go, friend Ananda, you're the busy one with many duties." A second time, the Venerable Ananda said to the Venerable Mahakassapa, "Come, Venerable Kassapa, let us go to the Bhikkhuni's quarters." "You go, friend Ananda, you're the busy one with many duties." At the third time, the Venerable Ananda said to the Venerable Mahakassapa, Come, Venerable Kassapa, let us go to the Bhikkhuni's quarters." So we see in this sutta, Venerable Ananda is already in Savatthi. So probably the sutta we just read is set before this one. So in the sutta we just read, Ananda was traveling in Dakshinagiri and then reached Savatthi, and now Ananda is already at Savatthi. So these are probably two suttas that are set in a row. And we see Ananda wants to go visit the Bhikkhunis, as is very much in character for him, and he tries to convince Kassapa, and Kassapa does not want to go, which is also very much in character for Kassapa. And Kassapa also declines by saying that Ananda is the busy one with many duties, and again, that's not something that's meant as a compliment. As a monastic, it's very much praised if you don't have many duties, and if you have let go of duties and kind of practice in seclusion, especially in the case of Ananda, who is a stream enterer and has not yet reached arahantship. So when Ananda said it the third time, Kassapa finally relents and then decides to actually go and visit the bhikkhunis. And the sutta continues. Then in the morning, the Venerable Mahakassapa dressed, and taking bowl and robe, went to the bhikkhunis' quarters with the Venerable Ananda as his companion. When he arrived, he sat down on the appointed seat. Then a number of bhikkhunis approached the Venerable Mahakassapa, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side. As they were sitting there, the Venerable Mahakassapa instructed, exhorted, inspired, and gladdened those bhikkhunis with the Dhamma talk, after which he rose from his seat and departed. Then the bhikkhuni Tulla Tissa, being displeased, expressed her displeasure thus: how can Master Mahakassapa think of speaking on the Dhamma in the presence of Master Ananda, the Videhan sage? For Master Mahakassapa to think of speaking on the Dhamma in the presence of Master Ananda, the Videhan sage, this is just as if a needle peddler would think he could sell a needle to a needle maker. So again, we see bhikkhuni criticizing Mahakassapa and siding with Ananda. And this time the bhikkhuni's name is Tulla Tissa. So again, Tulla means fat, the fat Tissa. So again, this is not a compliment. And in the Pali tradition, this is the only place in the entire canon where Tulla Tissa appears. So in the Pali tradition, we don't actually know much about her. In the Chinese traditions, she appears in the Dhammaguptaka Vinaya and also in the Sarvastivada Vinaya. And we know, like in the Pali tradition and also those other traditions, we know that Tulananda, the nun we just saw in the other sutta, had many sisters. Tradition says between 4 and 6, like between 3 and 6. So there were either 4 or 7 sisters altogether. And Tissa is well attested as the name of one of her sisters. So it seems that, this is Tulananda's sister here who is speaking up. And again, it's misbehaving bhikkhuni siding with Ananda and criticizing Mahakassapa. And the Venerable Mahakassapa overheard the bhikkhuni Tulla Tissa making this statement and said to the Venerable Ananda, how is it, friend Ananda? Am I the needle peddler and you the needle maker? Or am I the needle maker and you the needle peddler? And Ananda replies, be patient, Venerable Kassapa, women are foolish. So this is obviously a statement that is a little bit out of character for Ananda to make such a sweeping generalization about women. And Bhante Sujato translates this passage as the woman is a fool. So as a singular, as a specific reference only to Tulla Tissa instead of a sweeping generalization towards all women. And when we look at the Pali, we see the Pali is Balo Matugamo, and that seems like that definitely seems like singular to me. So to me it seems justified to actually translate this as a singular and to think that Ananda was just referring to that one bhikkhuni who in the Vinaya traditions is actually well attested as a misbehaving nun. The Chinese Vinaya traditions as a misbehaving nun. So in that way, it does make a lot more sense if we just think that Ananda is talking about that specific single woman instead of all women in general. But Kassapa is not appeased by Ananda's statement, and he says, hold it, friend Ananda, don't give the sangha occasion to investigate you further. So here he starts to threaten Ananda actually. And the threat here is like the investigation that the Sangha would be carrying out is that Ananda is seen as being too close to the bhikkhunis, too friendly and too supportive of them. So there could be an investigation whether they have improper relations whether there's something fishy going on between him and those bhikkhunis. So that is the threat leveled against Ananda here. And of course, that then becomes a threat that is leveled against all the monks, or that could potentially be leveled against all the monks who are supportive of bhikkhunis. So it becomes more difficult for bhikkhus to be openly supportive of bhikkhunis in the time after the Buddha's passing. Because the Buddha is no longer around. The Buddha who was very supportive of bhikkhunis is no longer around. So certain misogynistic tendencies start to show up more prominently in the Sangha at this point. And we will see that a lot more clearly next week when we read the story about the first council. So Kassapa continues, what do you think, friend Ananda? Was it you that the Blessed One brought forward in the presence of the Bhikkhu Sangha, saying, Bhikkhus, to whatever extent I wish, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I enter and dwell in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thought and examination with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. Ananda too, to whatever extent he wishes, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, enters and dwells in the first jhana. No, Venerable Sir, I was the one friend that the Blessed One brought forward in the presence of the Bhikkhu Sangha, saying, Bhikkhus, to whatever extent I wish, I enter and dwell in the first jhana. Kassapa too, to whatever extent he wishes, enters and dwells in the first jhana. So again, Kassapa is pointing out how much superior his attainments are to Ananda, and how he was the one who was actually praised by the Buddha, and Ananda wasn't praised by the Buddha in the same way. And obviously, Ananda, being a stream enterer, doesn't have the attainments that Kassapa was praised for. So, and again, they're going through all the different attainments, the 4 jhanas, the immaterial attainment, cessation, and then the 6 abhinyas, and then also Kassapa declaring arahantship, the destruction of the taints. And finally, Kassapa again makes that same comparison, the same simile. Friend, one might just as well think that a bull elephant 7 or 7.5 cubits high could be concealed by a palm leaf, as think that my 6 direct knowledges could be concealed. But the bhikkhuni Tulatissa fell away from the holy life. So again, a bhikkhuni who did not recognize Mahakassapa's superior spiritual attainments, actually is shown as not even having enough merit or enough commitment to the Dhamma to be able to even practice the holy life. This is the end of the sutta. I hope what we have seen today is that there were considerable tensions in the Sangha after the Buddha's passing. People had quite different outlooks at how the practice should be organized, and the different tendencies in the Sangha were exemplified by Mahakassapa and by Ananda on the both sides. And also bhikkhunis did play a role in this. Bhikkhunis here are shown as being quite silly, not being able to recognize the people who have true spiritual attainments. And also we see that Ananda is being threatened for being too close to bhikkhunis. So being supportive of bhikkhunis became much harder at that time. And this is the end of today's sutta study. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat and I will be happy to address them. And next week we will continue with our exploration by reading the story of the first council. And I see a few more people have joined. Very nice to see you all. Hello, Shital. Oh, hello, Venerable Kovilo. Nice to see you. Shadow of Label, welcome. And that's it, I think. I see Gita has left a few questions. No, Shadow of Label is asking, so are you saying I could buy a group of monks subway? Yeah, sure. But anyway, that wouldn't mean inviting them to your home, so the rule wouldn't apply in the first place. And Gita tells us that her cousin had 81 monks for lunch dana at his home when his brother passed away in Sri Lanka. Is this acceptable? For inviting many sangha members, it was wonderful offering. Where, as I explained, if he didn't specifically request the names of those 81 monks, if he just said, please send me 81 monks to the sangha, or if he invited the entire sangha of a specific place or of several specific places, then that's totally okay. The problem is only if you go to the sangha and you ask for, like, if you invite specific monks or nuns, like if you say Venerable A, Venerable B, Venerable C, and Venerable D, my specific personal friends should be coming to my place and no other monks should be coming or no other nuns should be coming, then that is a problem. And Gita says that is funny. Okay, I don't know what that refers to, but I'm glad that something was entertaining today. And Gita says, is there a sutta where Venerable Mahakassapa did not agree with female ordination? I didn't know this. Yes, next week when we read the first council, we will see that, oh wow, second sutta, Venerable Mahakassapa didn't want to teach the bhikkhunis. Yes. Yes, so I recommend you come next week again and read the story of the first council, then everything will become much more clear. Yeah. And Kumo says, is it possible for Arahant Mahakassapa to act in that manner, as those kind of thoughts and acts seem like unwholesome and defilements? Well, it is totally possible for Arahants to point out their spiritual attainments. I think if that is what you're referring to. So the Buddha very frequently pointed out his attainments, and other monks, nuns to a lesser extent, but monks also pointed that out. Often that's called the lion's roar. So if they speak truthfully, there isn't really too much of a problem with that. Only if you think this is of benefit, if you think this is inspiring or this is a kind of teaching, then there isn't really a problem with it. If you do it to put other people down or to criticize other people, then there is a problem. But then obviously you also wouldn't really be an arahant because you still have those defilements and those this kind of ill will towards others. So yeah, if you're referring to the question about the misogyny and the him not treating bhikkhunis right, then I think here in these suttas, the misogyny isn't really that obvious. He's mainly criticizing Tulananda and Tulatissa, who by ordinary standards really are misbehaving nuns. So in this suttas here, it's not really obvious that he is truly misogynistic. When we read the first council story next week, that will be different. Like there, it will be really obvious. But also the first council story is a little bit later. So whether that is true or whether that was put in his mouth is something that we have to talk about next week. So I don't really want to go into that in detail now because we haven't really seen all the texts that are relevant to the question. A few thank yous, very nice. Ayya Suma says, Ayya, I don't see how these suttas show the lack of support of the Bhikkhuni Sangha. Can you elaborate on why you think this is the case? Yeah, as I mentioned, this is the prequel of the narrative of the first council, in which this becomes a lot more clear. Here we just see underlying tendencies that aren't out in the open yet. So we see that Kassapa is very reluctant to go see the Bhikkhunis. He doesn't really want to teach them. And yeah, I agree. It's not really obvious in this sutta. It's just something. It's just a tendency that starts to emerge here in these suttas, and that will become a lot more clear once we read the other sutta next week. Yeah, here we just see that Mahakassapa was really reluctant, and that he had to really be persuaded by Ananda to go. But once he went there, he did teach the bhikkhunis. So he wasn't totally opposed to the bhikkhunis at this point. But he did threaten Ananda because Ananda is well known as a supporter of bhikkhunis. And when Ananda tried to appease Mahakassapa and sort of kind of try to calm him down and not make a big deal of the statement that Tulatissa made, then Kassapa threatens Ananda by saying, don't give the Sangha occasion to investigate you further. And that clearly refers to him being close to the bhikkhunis. So by doing that, it does create a barrier for other monks to be supportive of bhikkhunis, because Ananda clearly didn't have improper relationships with bhikkhunis. Ananda was just very supportive of the Sangha. So there's no story anywhere at all that Ananda might have had any improper motivations when he supported the nuns. So this kind of threat, which is clearly out of the blue and doesn't have a proper foundation, is something that makes it a lot more difficult for later monks to be openly supportive of bhikkhunis. Yeah, something, Bhante says, the Ayya, something seems a bit odd about these two suttas. The presentation of Mahakassapa as petty, Ananda is foolish, and the bhikkhunis as incompetent. This all seem to indicate that these two suttas may have been edited later. What are your thoughts on this? Yeah, I think this is something we see throughout this whole cycle of text that we are going through, like this whole course about the transition years. We already saw that when we talked about the Mahapanibbana Sutta. We saw that the Mahapanibbana Sutta was also edited, and in some parts, Ananda was really put down, and it also seemed very like this was a later interpolation. And in other parts, Ananda was really praised, like really over the top being praised. And also that seemed also like something that could have been added later. And we know that the Mahapanibbana Sutta is a later sutta that was edited over a long period of time. And we know that a lot of parts of the Mahapanibbana Sutta were added. Like what I'm trying to do in this course is just show the tendencies that are present in the Sangha during this period of time and somewhat later. So I wouldn't say that this actually happened, like this Mahakassapa and Ananda said these exact words. But I think Ananda and Mahakassapa are the representatives of two factions in the Sangha, two groups in the Sangha who struggled with each other for to determine the future course of Buddhism. And what we see here is the struggle of those groups in the Sangha. And because they have chosen these two famous monks as their representatives, we see these monks somewhat acting out of character because they represent those tendencies of groups of monks who might not all be fully enlightened. But that's really something we should discuss more once we have read all the suttas in this cycle, especially the story of the first council. So here, what I'm trying to show in the course is the general tendencies that were prevalent in the Sangha, but not like I personally also am not convinced that Mahakassapa specifically said these particular things, but I think that this was something that was prominent in the kind of group that was around him. And I'm also not convinced that Ananda acted in these specific ways, but that this was again something that represented the general group that formed around him and the general practices that were represented by his group. So, yeah, I think it will become a lot more clearer next week in the story of the first council, because that story, everything is a lot more out in the open. Here, a lot of things are under the cover and just hinted at, and in the first council story, everything is really out in the open. And Kumu says, guess both may have had some minor disagreements. Yeah, as I mentioned, like there are these different tendencies in the Sangha, and I mean they were present throughout the entire Buddhist dispensation. Even when the Buddha was still alive, we know that characters of people are just different, and some people incline more towards seclusion and towards being reclusive in the forest, and other people like to be more sociable. And that's something that has continued throughout the ages and continues until nowadays. Like we have socially engaged Buddhist monks and nuns, and we have the ones who withdraw into the forest and like to live in caves or in their kutis, and who rarely interact with lay people. So that's just something to be expected. But while the Buddha was alive, everything was held together by him as a unifying figure. But after he passed away, there was no more unifying figure. So those frictions started to show up a lot more prominently. And one of the things that was being debated a lot was the role of women. And we will see next week the women become a political topic in the male sangha, and the different approaches towards women then define which group you belong to in the male sangha. And at that point, because it becomes a political thing in the male sangha, the Bhikkhuni Sangha is no longer able to really develop on their own, because all the various parts of the male sangha try to exert influence on the female sangha, because that sort of defines their affiliation within their own male sangha. And I see a few more comments have popped up. Yes, Bantasudasu, I agree that that's what I was trying to say. And Geeta says she's looking forward. Okay, that's great. Ayasoma says, sounds like the Bakula Sutta, a later sutta, where there are quite some Hinayana views pushed forward and presented as Dhamma. Yeah, exactly. The Bakula Sutta is also a sutta we are going to read in this course about the transition years. So that is, again, something that will be really interesting to look at. And also, yeah, that shows very clearly a few tendencies at that later point in time. And the Bakula Sutta, of course, is very late. Like the Bakula Sutta is like it's well attested that that's a later sutta, and it was edited even at the second council. So even the commentaries acknowledge that this sutta is really pretty late. And Amaranta says, very interesting. I learned a lot today. I never had this historical perspective. Okay, I'm glad this is what we're trying to do in this course. I didn't really expect to go into so much detail today, because I expected to do that next week or the week after we've read a few more texts and got a little bit like more overview, and also like see the development over a little bit longer time. The first council took place after this, and then we're reading 2 more suttas that take place even later to see the development and also see the different perspectives. One sutta will be spoken by Ananda, who represents one perspective. Another sutta, the Bakula Sutta, will be spoken by a person who seems to be more in the austere, reclusive, strict camp that is sort of represented by the Mahakassapa group. So we will see like the different groups take on what is happening in the Sangha at that later point in time. So yeah, I hope that will still be interesting to explore. And personally, I find that this topic is extremely fascinating, because at that point in time, like we see so many things being discussed that are still being discussed nowadays, and we see that many of the issues that create problem, especially for the female sangha, but also for Buddhism at large, have to do with decisions that were made during this transition period and during the early years when the sangha was on their own, and then certain influences that certain groups in the sangha had over the formation of our texts and the compilation and the authentication of our canons, which still impact us nowadays, and which especially impact the female sangha, but also impact Buddhism at large. And for that reason, it's really fascinating to explore this in a lot more detail. So I hope you all come back next week to follow up on the story of the first council. And if there are no further questions, I think we can end for today. And as usual, we will end with 3 sadhus. Feel free to join me if you want to join. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. See you all next week.